Hey guys, and welcome back to the Selenium WebDriver with JavaScript video series on the LambdaTest YouTube channel. My name is Ryan, and during this video we're going to be exploring how we can execute our Selenium WebDriver tests on LambdaTest's cloud-based Selenium Grid. Now, before we update any of our tests, we'll first take a moment to introduce ourselves to LambdaTest and look at what the key features of LambdaTest are. Secondly, we'll explore some of the advantages of using LambdaTest. Then we'll have a look at the LambdaTest portal and understand where we can get our username and access key from. We'll need to add these to our tests in order to run them. Then we're going to look at how to set up our desired capabilities, including things like the browser and the browser version. After that, we'll be ready to update our tests and run them on LambdaTest. And of course, at the end, we'll do a full review of everything that we've achieved during this video. So let's get started and look at what LambdaTest is. So LambdaTest is a cloud-based platform that we can use to run our Selenium tests against multiple browsers and browser versions. So currently we've only been running our tests on our local machines by downloading the drivers to the particular browser we want to use, in our instance Firefox. With LambdaTest, we can instead select browsers and browser versions that we require and execute our tests directly against them, instead of having to download multiple different browsers and browser versions on our local machines. The advantage of using the LambdaTest platform is that by doing so, we won't have to maintain our own locally hosted Selenium Grid. So as I mentioned, we're only using the Firefox browser in our tests so far. But imagine if you wanted to execute those tests against several different browsers and several different browser versions and operating systems as well. You can imagine that this will get quite complicated to maintain over time, ensuring you've got the latest drivers installed and multiple versions of the same browsers available to you. By using LambdaTest, we can utilize the thousands of different browser version operating system combinations they have and just execute our tests against the versions that we need to. Now, in order to utilize LambdaTest in our Selenium WebDriver tests, we'll need to add a username and an access key to our script. Before we can do that, you'll need to sign up to LambdaTest. You can do that at LambdaTest.com by either selecting the pricing item on the menu and then selecting the required plan, or you can use the Start Free Testing option in the top right hand corner. Now, once you're signed up and logged in, you can access your account, and from your account you'll be able to see your username and your access key. If I click up here and then go to my profile, here you can see that I've got my username here and my access token, and you can just copy out both of these and use them in your tests. So along with the username and access key, which we've just retrieved, we'll also need to add a little bit more detail to our tests around which browsers and browser versions and operating systems we want to run those tests on when we execute them on the LambdaTest platform. Now, the easy way to build those capabilities up is to use the LambdaTest capability generator. So if you navigate to lambdatest.com/capabilities generator, you'll see this screen. And from here, you can define the capabilities that you want to use and get them in the exact format that your particular scripting language requires. So for example, in our test, we're using Selenium 4 and we are using JavaScript. So if I click here, it then returns everything that I'll need to add to my tests in order to run them on LambdaTest with this browser. So you can see the selection at the moment is Windows 10, Chrome on version 19.2. But if I wanted to run this on a different version of Windows or even on Mac, I could do that. And then I could change the browser accordingly. So if I wanted to run it on Edge instead, and maybe I wanted to change the version, you can see that the capabilities here are updated based on what I've selected here. There are other specific things I can select as well if there are special requirements that I need in my test. But for now, let's go back to our configuration here and we'll select Windows 10, and this time we'll run it on Chrome. So far we've only run locally on Firefox, so we'll run on Chrome and we'll do the latest version of Chrome, the beta version. We've made sure we've got Selenium 4 selected because that's what we're using in our test, and we've highlighted JavaScript here to get this in the right format. So we can copy this to clipboard and then we'll be able to use that in our tests. Now that we've got our desired capabilities from the capabilities generator, we can add those to our tests and configure our tests to run on LambdaTest as opposed to running locally as they are now. So we're going to make a few changes to our tests. To start with, I'm going to add a brand new file and let's call it capabilities.js JavaScript file, and it's in the root folder of our project. And we're just going to paste in the capabilities that we got from the capabilities generator, which has all the config we need to run on our chosen browser. In addition to what we've already got, I'm just going to change a couple of these values. So this build one, we'll just call it test build, and the name, we'll call it Selenium Test. These values will make a little bit more sense in a minute. I've also got our username and access key, and obviously the browser and operating system details that we need to run our test. Cool. So in order to use these specified capabilities in our test files, we need to first export it from here, and then we can import it where we need it. To export, we can just use module.exports equals curly bracket, and then inside here we can add the name of our variable, so capabilities, just like that. So this then allows us to import it into our test files. So we're going to be working on our second test.js file. So if I open that up, and right at the top here under our require Selenium WebDriver, I'm going to add a new constant, and I'm going to call this one, just so we know what it is, I'll call it LT for LambdaTest and capabilities. Okay, LambdaTest capabilities equals require, and then we just need to specify the path to where we can find our capabilities.js file, which is ... to go upper directory, And if I put slash there, it automatically brings back the files and directories inside the root directory of our project. The one we're interested in is capabilities. Cool. So we've now required LT capabilities, our capabilities, into our test file, but we're not using them yet. In order to use them, we're going to write some more code under this describe block. So far in our describe block, we've only used additional it functions, but you can actually write information directly inside your describe. And the advantage of doing that is that it's then accessible by all of your it functions. So instead of specifying something individually in each it block, we can actually specify it directly in describe, and therefore we don't have to duplicate that information across multiple tests. Now we need to tell our tests how to connect to LambdaTest. So far we've imported the capabilities, but we haven't told our tests how they can access the LambdaTest Selenium Grid. So we're going to do that now. And the information we need to include is username, key, and then a host. And then by combining these bits of information, we're going to create the URL that we can use to access the LambdaTest platform. This isn't the URL to our application, which we have here. This is the URL to the LambdaTest application. Now, username and key we already have. We've got them specified in our capabilities. So we can pull them out now. So constant, I'm going to call this one username, all in caps. Now, this will be equal to LT capabilities dot capabilities dot the value for that particular capability, if I highlight this, is user dot user, like that. And then for our key, we can do a very similar thing. Let's copy that. This time we'll call it key, and this time it is called access key. So what we're just saying here is that set the value of username to the values stored in the user field of our capabilities file, and we're then doing the same for our access key. Now, the name of the host we can access from the LambdaTest dashboard, but I've also got it here, so let me copy it over like so. So we've got a new constant called grid host, and this holds our host for LambdaTest. And we're then combining these three pieces of information to generate our grid host, which is made up of our username, our key, and our grid host. So now that we've specified this information, we can use it to build our driver instance. So far, when we've created our driver instance, we've done it using this line here. And we specified the browser we want to use when building our driver. And we've actually got this line specified in both of our it blocks. which isn't great for duplication. It means if our browser changes, we have to change it in 2 different places. So this time when we build our driver, we're going to do it slightly differently. We're going to be utilizing another mocker function, this time called before each. Now, before each functions are really useful because they allow us to specify bits of code to be executed prior to each it block. So if we specify information in a before each block inside our describe, that before each function is going to be executed prior to every it block. So it's really great to add information without having to duplicate it across multiple it blocks. In order to create a before each, we can use the same syntax as we've used for describe and it. But this time we call it before each. We don't actually mean for this. The function. Like this. So we've got our before each block now, and it sits inside our describe block. Now, in here, we're going to build our driver instance. In order to do that, in our describe block, I'm just going to add a new variable called driver. We don't need to specify a value because we're going to do that inside our before each block. So it's going to look a little bit like this. So I'll just copy that and add that here. We don't need the await keyword because we're not using an asynchronous function. So we're going to do a driver new builder, and we no longer need to specify the for browser because we're doing that inside our capabilities instead. So we don't need to explicitly say it here. What we do need to add is using server. So new builder dot using server, and in here we need to specify the URL of the server, and that's our grid URL. So we can just add our grid URL instance there. And lastly, we need to use our pass in our capabilities as well, and we do that using with capabilities, and then inside here we're going to use LT capabilities, which we've required up here, and then it's LT capability dot capabilities. Now this is getting a little bit long, so I'm just going to add this to a new line. It's a little bit clearer what we're doing. So now, as before, we're building a new driver instance, but this time, instead of specifying for browser, we're specifying the use server here and passing in our grid URL for our LambdaTest Selenium Grid. And then we're also passing in our capabilities, which is where we're specifying the browser and browser version and operating system that we want to use. Cool. So now that we're doing that within our before each, we no longer need to do it in our it block. So I can comment out that there. And as I mentioned, this before each will get run before each of the it blocks. So I can comment it out here as well. So that's good so far. We're getting pretty close to being able to run our tests on LambdaTest. I'll just save this. So there's one final thing that I want to do in order to tidy up this script a little bit more and get rid of some duplication. So I'm going to create, inside my describe block, I'm going to create a new function. So I'll just copy this before each and paste it. But this time, instead of calling before each, we're going to call after each. Now, after each, as you probably guessed, is much the same as a before each function. It's part of the Mocha framework, but this time the code inside the after each function gets executed after each it block. And again, we can use it to allow us to add code in here that needs to be executed after each of our tests, and means we don't have to add it directly into each of the it blocks. So it's really good if there are cleanup tasks or teardown scripts that you need to run after each test to get ready for the next test. So in our tests at the moment, at the end of each one, we call this driver.quit method here in order to close the browser. And as I mentioned, we've got this in both of our tests here. So what we can do is add that to our after each block instead, and then we don't have to call it in both of our tests. So let's do that now. So if I remove that, and add that in here, I'm going to make this an async function, and we're simply just going to quit the driver as part of this after each. So we've removed it from this test, and we can also remove it from this test as well. I'll just save that. Okay, so now we've done everything we need to do in order to run our tests on LambdaTest. The final thing I'm going to do is make this second test pass. So currently it fails because we are writing the phrase learn Selenium, but we're expecting it to be learn JavaScript. So I'm just going to copy this here and add it there. So our expected and actual text will match now. So both of these tests should pass. So if I save that. Now, to run our tests on LambdaTest, we use exactly the same method as we did when we were running them locally. We just use the terminal and call our npm test script. So if I open up a new terminal, and then from here we'll do npm test. Now it's worth noting that we haven't actually updated firsttest.js, so this test is still going to run on our local Firefox instance. So we should see one browser instance launch and run our firsttest.js, but we won't see the browser instances for secondtest.js because they'll be running on LambdaTest instead. So if I run this now, we should see that our one Firefox instance gets launched, and that's our first test. But if we go back, we've already got 3 passing tests, but we only saw the Firefox instance launch for this test here. So to see what's actually happened, we can head over to the LambdaTest dashboard and have a look. If I just refresh this now, you see on this recent test section, we have 2 tests, and the build is called test build. And if you remember, that's what we had detailed as our test build in our capabilities. If I click on one of these, I can then get a little bit more detail. So you can see that I've got 2 tests here. Both of them are called Selenium Tests. So maybe we'll correct that in a minute to make it a little bit more useful. But both my tests have passed. And if I click on this one here, for example, I also get this video which I can play to see exactly what's going on. So that's my test to add Learn Selenium, and I highlight this one, press play. This is my Learn JavaScript test. So you can see that both of these tests have been executed on the LambdaTest platform against the Chrome browser on Windows 10. So it's a little bit annoying that both of these tests have the same name. This is the name which actually comes from our capabilities file, but it doesn't make it very clear as to which test is which. So we can make a quick change to our script so that instead of returning this Selenium test name, it sets the name to the name of that particular it block. So for example, this here. It's super simple to do. All we're going to do in our before each block here, we're going to add a new line at the start, which will be lt capabilities dot name. So this is the file that we're requiring, followed by the name of the variable in that file, this capabilities, followed by the field we'd like to change, which is this name field. So lt capabilities.capabilities.name equals this dot current test, which exposes some information about the test which is currently running, dot title. And in our example, the title will be the name of the it block. So if I save that now and rerun our tests, we can jump over to the LambdaTest dashboard, and we can see we've got 2 new tests. So if I click on here, it displays them, and now we can see that we've got the more useful names based on the name of the it block. So that is it for this video, and we've finally been able to run our tests on the LambdaTest platform, which is a really great achievement. So if you wanted to discuss anything or needed any clarifications, then you can get hold of me on Twitter using the handle @RyanTester. Alternatively, you can contact LambdaTest directly and they'll be able to answer your queries. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to learn a bit more, why not visit the LambdaTest blog, where there are literally hundreds of blog posts on various testing topics that may interest you. Also check out the LambdaTest YouTube channel, where you can see more of these videos, including a new video series on using Cypress with LambdaTest. If you're interested in certifications, visit the certification section of the LambdaTest website, where you can learn all about Selenium certifications. So that brings this video to an end. I want to thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.